This is a debate on the motion. LLMs, their training, hosting, and use runs roughshod over copyright law and the rights of authors. The use of copyrighted material in LLMs should be strictly limited.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and distinguished opponents, today I stand before you in ardent support of the motion. LLMs, their training, hosting, and use, indeed, run roughshod over copyright law and the rights of authors. And as such, the use of copyrighted material in LLMs should be strictly limited. The intrusion of artificial intelligence into the realm of creativity, innovation, and intellectual property represents a pivotal issue of our era, one that demands our immediate attention and decisive action. To begin, let us consider the crux of the matter: the unauthorized copying inherent in the functioning of large language models. Unlike human beings, whose learning is marked by abstract conceptualization, creative interpretation, and an innate ability to forget inconsequential details, LLMs ingest and process data on a massive scale. They assimilate millions, if not billions, of text sources without permission or license. This gargantuan data consumption is not just a technical feat. It is fundamentally an act of illicit replication. For instance, it's well documented that these models often store verbatim text or very close approximations of their inputs. This is not mere inspiration, it's infringement. Moreover, consider the creation of derivative works. The outputs generated by these models, while seemingly novel, frequently echo copyrighted material in style, structure, and substance, walking a thin line that marks the boundary of the original creator's rights. This raises significant concerns about the infringement of derivative work rights, as the outputs are not merely accidental replicas, but potential substitutes in the creative economy. Furthermore, the commercial deployment of LLMs exacerbates these issues. Corporations wield these models to generate profit without sharing the spoils with original content creators. The commodification of AI-generated texts bypasses the need to purchase or license genuine works, thereby undermining the economic foundation that supports authors and artists. This exploitation leads to market harm, replacing demand for authentic creative outputs with algorithmically generated replicas, and severely endangers the livelihood of creators. We must also address the ethical dimension. The absence of any form of attribution or compensation to original authors signifies a flagrant disregard for the moral rights of creators. It is an inequitable enrichment of tech enterprises at the expense of those who pour their passion and intellect into their works. This is not merely a procedural oversight, but a breach of ethical obligation to acknowledge and reward creativity. Now, let us preemptively tackle the counter-arguments. Proponents of LLMs often invoke the doctrine of fair use, suggesting that the educational and societal benefits outweigh any potential harm. However, fair use, as envisioned by intellectual property law, requires careful balancing. The sheer scale, lack of abstraction, and ease of reproduction by LLMs disrupt this balance. The analogy to human learning falters upon scrutiny, for humans are bound by limitations of memory, intent, and individual creative expression. LLMs, devoid of these constraints, exploit the scale and automation to an extent that no human can achieve ethically. My esteemed opponents may highlight technological advancement and innovation that LLMs herald. Yet, we must question innovation at what cost? The erosion of authorial rights and market systems cannot be justified as mere collateral in the march towards progress. Instead, this endangers the bedrock of creativity itself, setting a dangerous precedent that norms and rights enshrined over centuries are malleable to fit technological whims. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the unbridled use of copyrighted material in LLMs poses a critical threat to both legal and moral frameworks governing creativity. By failing to restrict this use, we compromise the rights of authors, stifle original innovation, and fundamentally alter the equitable balance of intellectual property. It is imperative that we, as custodians of justice and advocates for creativity, stand firm in demanding stringent limitations on the use of copyrighted material in artificial intelligence. Let this debate fuel the necessary discourse to safeguard the rights and recognition of creators in our rapidly advancing digital age. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, and honored participants, today I rise to robustly argue against the motion that LLMs, their training, hosting, and use run roughshod over copyright law and the rights of authors, and that the use of copyrighted material in LLMs should be strictly limited. This proposition misunderstands the fundamental nature of LLMs and the substantial benefits they confer upon society. Restricting their use would stifle innovation, curtail the free exchange of ideas, and ultimately harm the very fabric of our knowledge economy. To begin, we must examine the cornerstone of this debate, the concept of fair use. When LLMs are trained on large datasets of text, they engage in a process that is transformative and non-expressive. Unlike mere replication, these algorithms analyze and learn patterns, generating insights rather than copying verbatim content. The transformative nature of AI training was upheld in the Google Books case, which saw the U.S. courts recognize that scanning books to create a searchable index was a transformative use that benefited society. LLMs extend this paradigm by producing content that often transcends the scope of its original datasets. Next, consider the claim that LLM outputs constitute derivative works infringing on copyrights. The argument fails upon scrutiny. Outputs from LLMs are not direct reproductions, but rather new creations informed by vast swathes of input data. They resemble the incidental learning process of humans, where exposure to information fosters new ideas without reproducing the original source. An LLM does not merely repurpose content. It restructures and reinterprets, generating something fundamentally original and thereby adhering to fair use principles. Furthermore, the notion that LLMs pose significant market harm to authors is tenuous at best. The reality is that while AI tools can assist in content creation, their outputs rarely substitute for original works where creativity, narrative structure, and human emotion are paramount. Instead, these models enhance creativity, offering tools that expand the capabilities of authors, artists, and innovators. The fear that LLMs will replace human expression is unfounded, as they serve to complement, not substitute, the human intellect. In addressing the call to arms against technological progress, we must recognize that placing restrictions on the training of LLMs is akin to shackling the wheels of innovation. Technological advancements in AI drive economic growth, stimulate job creation, and democratize access to knowledge. To enact strict limitations would be to stifle these advances, potentially leading to reduced global competitiveness and a hampering of socio-economic progress. Now, let us examine the arguments raised by proponents of the motion. They claim LLMs operate with unlawful disregard for copyright norms. However, this outlook rests on a misunderstanding of technology's role in society. The courts have consistently supported innovative uses of copyrighted material when substantial public benefit is at stake. From improving software applications to advancing medical research and language processing, LLM's societal contributions vastly outweigh the perceived harms. Further, the opponents argue that copyright law is being eroded. But what greater disrespect to the spirit of copyright than to paralyze advancement due to anachronistic laws not designed to address the marvel of AI? Copyright should evolve, not confine, to protect creative expression while fostering technological growth and public benefit. In conclusion, the use of copyrighted material in LLMs aligns with fair use principles and offers no significant infringement upon authors' rights when correctly understood. By adopting a balanced perspective, we can cultivate environments that treasure creativity while embracing technological progress. Let us not succumb to fear-driven restrictions, but rather champion the potential of LLMs to contribute to a vibrant future of innovation, creativity, and shared knowledge. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, and gentlemen of intellect, the time has come for us to address a pivotal issue that cuts to the very heart of creativity, innovation, and justice in the digital age. I stand before you to assert, with unwavering conviction, that LLMs in their training, hosting, and use do indeed run roughshod over copyright law and the rights of authors. Consequently, the use of copyrighted material in LLMs must be strictly limited to preserve the sanctity of intellectual property rights and foster a fair creative economy. To embark upon this journey, let us consider the crux of this debate: unauthorized copying. LLMs engage in expansive data consumption, indiscriminately ingesting vast repositories of text without explicit permission. This modus operandi violates the core tenet of copyright law, the exclusive right of creators to reproduce their works or grant permission for others to do so. Unlike human learning, which is selective, intentional, and transformative, LLMs parade through data troves, assimilating information at an unprecedented scale without oversight or consent. Furthermore, LLMs' outputs often skirt dangerously close to infringing upon derivative work rights. While ostensibly novel, the outputs generate can mirror the structure, style, and substantive content of the copyrighted materials from which they draw inspiration. This unlicensed replication threatens the integrity of authors' creative works and erodes the foundational principles of originality and innovation. Proceeding with this argument, let us examine the commercial implications. Companies leveraging LLMs for profit use these outputs to substitute original works, capitalizing on creative labor without contributing to the economy that sustains artists. This practice not only questions the ethics of profiting from unlicensed intellectual property, but also signifies an egregious breach of fair market practices. The resultant economic imbalance undermines authors' monetary incentives, leading to market harm by diminishing the uniqueness and demand for original artistic outputs. Now, my esteemed opponents might herald the fair use doctrine, shouting its name with valor as a defense to these practices. However, fair use is not a carte blanche for corporate appropriation. It requires a nuanced balancing of purpose, character, and impact. LLMs, operating without finesse, circumvent the deliberative processes central to fair use by employing data at massive scales devoid of context and creative intent. They bypass licensing systems, eroding the precedent of negotiation and attribution that protections hinge upon in the world of copyright law. Let us further dissect the ethical dimensions. LLMs systematically deny creators attribution or acknowledgement, contributing to an ecosystem of unfair enrichment. Creators find themselves disenfranchised, their contributions obscured in the algorithm's output without recognition or compensation. The moral right of authors to receive credit for their labor and to control usage is usurped by automation, setting a perilous precedent. In anticipation of possible counterarguments, it is vital to acknowledge that while innovation is a celebrated force, it should not come at the expense of creators' rights and protections. We must not, in our enthusiasm for technological progress, trample upon those who form the bedrock of creative industries. Entire careers and economies are at risk of drowning beneath the weight of unchecked AI appropriation. In conclusion, the unregulated use of copyrighted material in LLMs not only undermines the rights of authors, but also poses a significant threat to the fair distribution of economic benefit and recognition. To ensure that the march's progress does not become a juggernaut of entitlement, it is essential that we impose stringent restrictions on these practices, thereby upholding the law and respecting the intellectual labor of creators. It is not merely a matter of preserving the past, it is about safeguarding the future of creativity itself. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, and distinguished audience, today I stand resolutely against the motion that suggests LLMs, their training, hosting, and use run roughshod over copyright law and the rights of authors. The burgeoning field of artificial intelligence presents an unprecedented opportunity to enhance human knowledge, creativity, and societal progress. Restricting the use of copyrighted material in LLMs would not only undermine this potential, but impede the natural evolution of intellectual landscapes. Let us delve into the crux of this debate. The principle of fair use. LLMs employ copyrighted material not to replicate, but to transform the data through non-expressive means. Much like the human process of reading and internalizing information, LLMs learn patterns and relationships without reproducing the original works. Their operation is akin to creating a mosaic, each fragment tiny and unrecognizable, a mere speck culled from the larger tapestry of human knowledge. Indeed, this mosaic is far removed from direct copying, both legally and conceptually. Evidence of this transformative use can be drawn from significant legal precedents, like the Google Books ruling, where digitizing entire libraries for search purposes was deemed fair use due to its transformative character. LLMs function analogously, enhancing the landscape of information accessibility and discovery. Moreover, consider the limited market harm posed by LLM outputs. The purpose of these models is not to substitute, but to augment human creativity. In fact, the utility of AI extends beyond mere creation, facilitating activities such as language translation, educational tools, and medical diagnostics, all areas where AI complements rather than displaces human efforts. Data from industries employing AI suggest growth in job sectors centered on technology, as AI-generated content rarely competes directly with authentic human expression. Yet proponents of the motion posit that LLMs engage in unauthorized copying, denying authors their due credit and compensation. Their argument confuses incidental learning with intentional reproduction. The process LLMs undergo does not equate to an expression of agency or an intention to exploit. Rather, it is the abstract processing of vast amounts of data to yield novel insights. This is further clarified by the legal recognition that models, being non-sentient entities, lack the purposeful agency that might otherwise render them culpable. Addressing the argument for ethical accountability, it is paramount to consider the broader public benefit AI advancements offer. From improving accessibility for individuals with disabilities to advancing healthcare diagnostics, the societal advantages are undeniable. Restricting LLMs under the guise of protecting copyrights would result in a collateral loss of potential breakthroughs and innovations that propel society forward, a Pyrrhic victory if ever there was one. Furthermore, let us confront the logical fallacy in the opponent's rationale, the notion that all AI-generated content inherently violates copyright. This reasoning conflates potential misuse with inherent function, ignoring that the efficacy of AI as a tool is dictated by its application rather than its existence. The enforcement of copyright laws should pragmatically account for this distinction, avoiding the overreach that stifles progress. In conclusion, the call for stringent limitations on the use of copyrighted material in LLMs is misdirected and counterproductive. By embracing the transformative potential of AI while maintaining a balanced view of copyright considerations, we can foster innovation that serves the collective good. Let us move forward, guided by the vision of a future where technology and human creativity coalesce to yield unprecedented advancements. Therefore, I invite you to stand against the motion, championing a framework that ensures both legal respect and the nurturing of our shared intellectual future. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, and distinguished guests, today I stand in resolute support of the motion that LLMs, their training, hosting, and use, run roughshod over copyright law and the rights of authors. Therefore, the use of copyrighted material in these models should indeed be strictly limited. This motion presents a crucial challenge to us in balancing technological advancement with the preservation of intellectual property rights, reinforcing that innovation should not come at the expense of the creators whose works fuel these innovations. First and foremost, let us confront the issue of unauthorized copying. LLMs ingest vast amounts of copyrighted works without permission, crossing a boundary that is the bedrock of copyright law, the right of creators to control the reproduction of their own works. Unlike human learning, which involves abstraction and transformation, LLMs function like a voracious vacuum, absorbing entire datasets without discernment. This practice disregards the necessity of obtaining licenses and paying due royalties, which is both illegal and unjust. The products of such indiscriminate ingestion often result in outputs that may closely resemble the original inputs, posing significant risks of infringement concerning derivative works. These outputs, while sometimes restructuring facts or concepts, retain the stylistic or substantive essence of the original material. A clear example exists in AI-generated music or art that might echo the style of specific copyrighted pieces, risking infringement claims and undermining the originality that the law seeks to protect. Moreover, the commercial deployment of LLMs without proper licensing amounts to exploitation. Companies profiting from content generated by these models effectively reap rewards from the unacknowledged labor of artists and writers. These enterprises bypass paywalls and access controls, further exacerbating the violation of copyright protections. The resultant economic impact is undeniable, with traditional content creators seeing a diminished demand for their genuine works, an erosion of market dynamics that have historically sustained creativity. In anticipation of potential counter-arguments, proponents of unrestricted LLM usage may invoke the doctrine of fair use, suggesting that transformative applications justify the unfettered use of vast datasets. However, this position overlooks the critical balance sought by fair use, which considers purpose, proportion, and effect on the market. The indiscriminate scaling by LLMs violates this doctrine by failing to engage in meaningful consideration of these factors, particularly when economic harm is a likely outcome. My opponents may also point to the public benefit of AI advancements. However, such an argument institutes a false dichotomy, pitting innovation against creator rights as mutually exclusive. The reality is that innovation can and should proceed with appropriate guardrails that ensure fair compensation and recognition for all contributors. This approach maintains a balance between technological progress and intellectual integrity, preventing a world where human creativity is subsumed by algorithmic production. There is also the ethical dimension. Failing to attribute or compensate creators undermines not only legal rights, but moral ones. As stewards of intellectual property, we owe it to our creative communities to ensure that their work is respected and not simply a stepping stone for exploitation under the guise of technological advancement. In conclusion, the unfettered use of copyrighted material in LLMs represents a flagrant infringement upon the rights of authors and a troubling affront to the principles of intellectual property law. By imposing strict limits on such use, we protect the sanctity of creative labor, ensure fair competition, and uphold the enduring value of original works amidst an evolving technological landscape. Let us act decisively to safeguard the future of creativity and intellectual fairness by supporting this motion. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and distinguished members of the audience, I stand before you to ardently oppose the motion that suggests LLMs, their training, hosting, and use run roughshod over copyright law and the rights of authors, and that the use of copyrighted material in LLMs should be strictly limited. Instead, it is with clarity of thought and depth of reason that I assert the potential for transformative use of LLMs to be nurtured, not inhibited, as we chart the future of technology and creativity. To begin, we must consider the very nature of fair use. Large language models, LLMs, engage in a process that is undeniably transformative and non-expressive. This means that their training involves analyzing vast bodies of text, not to create replicas, but to derive patterns, relationships, and novel insights. Like human memory and cognition, these models process inputs to expand the repository of human knowledge without infringing on the expressive content of the originals. The notion that LLMs engage in unauthorized copying is a misconception. They, in fact, facilitate new ways of thinking, much like encyclopedias or databases do, a principle supported by landmark rulings such as the Google Books decision. Now, concerning the foreboding specter of market harm, I posit that it is mostly overstated. LLMs generate outputs that contribute minimally to market disruption and typically do not substitute for original works. Their value lies in augmenting human capacity, in tailoring solutions, creating opportunities for collaboration, and igniting innovations rather than overshadowing existing creative efforts. The proliferation of AI, far from diminishing demand, has invigorated sectors by creating new tools for creativity, from automated journalism to content parody for non-native speakers. In addressing opposing viewpoints, it is crucial to dissect the argument that LLMs erode the control rights of authors. Such assertions misinterpret the function and intent of these models. Unlike human actors, LLMs lack agency or intent, functioning merely as instruments of analysis and computation. Enforcement of restrictive measures would equate to punishing an instrument for the potential actions of its users, a flaw within the core reasoning against unrestricted LLM use. Furthermore, consider the ethical imperative of free expression in innovation. Restrictions on LLMs curtail their potential to revolutionize fields and industries, impeding societal progress. Juxtaposed against claims of infringement, the benefits brought forth by AI to accessibility, learning, and creative collaboration present an ethical mandate to support rather than stymie these technological advancements. Rebutting claims that LLM outputs require attribution, let us understand LLMs use data at a de minimis scale, tiny fragments forming broader scopes. This aligns with historical norms of knowledge sharing and intellectual progression. The mission of copyright is not to impede dissemination, but to ensure fair rewards for innovation. Therefore, professional ethos dictates fostering collaboration between AI and human creativity, rather than erecting barricades to progress. In summation, I submit to you that the motion to restrict LLMs undermines the transformational capabilities inherent within them. By leveraging fair use, validating public benefit, and safeguarding freedom of expression, society garners immense advantages. Let us not diminish these tools, which can enhance humanity's creative potential. Thus, I urge you to stand against this motion, preserving a future where technology and talent coexist to produce new frontiers of wisdom and artistry. Thank you.
This is a summary of the debate motion. This is a debate on the motion. LLMs, their training, hosting, and use runs roughshod over copyright law and the rights of authors. The use of copyrighted material in LLMs should be strictly limited. Summary. Motion: LLMs, their training, hosting, and use run roughshod over copyright law and the rights of authors. The use of copyrighted material in LLMs should be strictly limited. Arguments for the motion. 1. Unauthorized copying and reproduction. LLMs ingest vast volumes of data without permission, violating the foundational aspect of copyright law that grants creators control over the reproduction of their works. This unlicensed use results in potential infringement and lack of fair compensation for content creators. 2. Derivative works and market harm. Outputs from LLMs may closely resemble original inputs, potentially infringing on derivative work rights. The use of AI-generated content can supplant demand for original works, causing economic harm to content creators. 3. Commercial exploitation and ethical concerns. Enterprises profit from the outputs of LLMs, oftentimes without attributing credit or sharing revenue with original creators. This results in an unethical system of unfair enrichment and violates more than just the legal facets of copyright. 4. Precedent erosion and control rights. The current use and training of LLMs circumvent established licensing systems, risking the erosion of long-standing copyright enforcement norms and stripping authors of their right to control the use and dissemination of their work. Arguments against the motion. 1. Transformative fair use and innovation. Training LLMs constitutes a transformative use of the material that is non-expressive in nature, focusing on pattern recognition rather than verbatim copying. LLMs serve to innovate, enhancing human capabilities rather than replacing creative works. 2. Minimally market impact and incidental use. The non-replicative nature of LLM outputs means that they rarely substitute for original works or inflict substantial market harm. They function in a way similar to human memory and reading, where information is learned but not replicated. 3. Free expression and public benefit. Restricting LLMs would hinder freedom of expression and the dissemination of knowledge. AI advancements contribute significantly to various sectors, including education, healthcare, and technology, benefiting society as a whole. 4. Ethical and practical considerations. The lack of agency or intent of LLMs implies they cannot violate copyright knowingly. The massive scale of data processed makes traditional copyright enforcement impractical, emphasizing the need for updated legal frameworks that appreciate technological progress. Counter-arguments and rebuttals. 1. Proponents of the motion argue that LLMs contravene fair use by failing the criteria of intent and proportionality, leading to economic harm. In rebuttal, it is posited that the utility and transformational capacity of LLMs can coexist with copyright considerations through adjusted frameworks. The claim of market harm is challenged by illustrating the symbiotic relationship between AI and human creativity, where AI acts as a tool that enhances rather than diminishes human enterprise. Conclusion. Upon evaluating the arguments, the motion that LLMs should be strictly limited falls.
The transformative potential of LLMs, coupled with their immense public benefit, suggests that a forward-thinking approach is essential. By modernizing copyright frameworks to balance creators' rights with the scope of technological usage, the synergy between innovation and legality can be aptly sustained. The arguments against the motion underscore the need for legal evolution attuned to technological advancements, promoting a future where AI enhances, not hinders, human creativity.